Welcome to The Leap with Japa, the podcast that bridges continents and connects stories. Join us as we dive into the vibrant world of international education, explore diverse cultures, and share the extraordinary journeys of students far from home. Whether you're dreaming of studying abroad or already embarking on this adventure through other means, Leap with Japa is your companion in navigating the exciting, challenging, and transformative world of global education. Let's leap into today's episode. Hello, Brian. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me here on my little podcast, Leap with Japa. Thank you very much for the opportunity to interview
Doing great.
you.
It's
How are
good
you?
to see you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. For people that listening, Brian is my career coach, and he's been instrumental in trying to give me some form of direction, and I felt it was a good idea to bring him on to kind of give us what he does and why it's important. I'm not gonna give too much information about what he does. So Brian, can you tell us about your background and what led you to become a career coach?
As we speak now in 2024, I have been in the tech industry for about 26 years, which feels like 1,000 years for anyone who's been in it for long enough. But I haven't been in the same discipline the whole time. I was a software engineer for about a decade. I was an engineering manager for about 5 or 6 years. I was a TPM for about 10 years, and I've been an analyst in between and worked in BI, and I've been a tester. So I've played a lot of these different roles over my career. But as I sit talking with you today, I can confidently state my most fulfilling job was none of those jobs. Those jobs were great, and I loved the people I worked with, and they were sharp, and I loved building things and shipping things.
Right.
But my most fulfilling role was actually being an athletics coach with my wife for about 13 years. So she and I.
Yeah, you told me about that. Can you tell me more about how that is connected?
Because she and I met playing a sport. It was volleyball, and at some point she decided to become a coach, and she said, "You want to come help me?" And I was like, "No, why would I want to do that? That sounds like an awful, terrible, frustrating thing to do, to coach little kids when we've been playing like high level sports." So for a context, like my wife she had a full ride scholarship to college to play volleyball, so she was a high level player. And I played maybe 30 hours a week in college, so I played a lot. But it was at a higher level, and I thought, why would I want to coach like 12 or 13-year-old kids? Like, what about what I do would be useful to them, and wouldn't they be annoying and not want to be there and things like that?
Right.
And I couldn't have been more wrong. My wife sort of forced me to go, and I'm still grateful to this day that she did that. So we're recording this on International Women's Day. So thank you to my wife, who's been instrumental in the growth of my own career and my fulfillment and happiness, because I would not be where I am today if my wife had not forced me to come with her. The skies kind of parted, and I said, wow, helping other people succeed in an environment where they want to be there, and they're hungry to learn, and they're eager to tackle these goals was fulfilling at a level I had never felt before. And it's why I became a career coach now, and why you and I got to work together, a while back. So I went and found, it was wonderful to have that experience, but it was also terrifying in a way to say, wait a minute, I am terrible at predicting in advance whether anything will be fulfilling if I haven't tried it before. So I went and sought my own career coach. I got a coach. I was an athletics coach, and I said, what's going on here? And she helped me get the career clarity I was looking for, that I'm effectively put on this earth to help other people succeed. And I want to do it in a way where I can help people in tech. So now I sort of combine these 26 years in tech and now these 17 years in combined coaching, so that I have this 43 years of experience to help people in tech achieve their career goals. And it's been a very fulfilling experience so far over the past 2 years.
Very, very interesting, because I noticed how you are able to come from the other side. So that's one of the things that I notice that you do so well. So typically what you usually see with coaches is, oh, you can do your best, you should do X, you should do Y. But now you've been on this other side. You're not coming from the point of, oh, you know what? I think this is what you should do. It's going to be, tell me the scenario of what you're going through. This is what I think went wrong, because this is what the manager is thinking. This is what management is thinking. And it's more like you're sitting on my side now, which is very rare, which is why that pull towards you was important. So what does, for those unfamiliar, what does a career coach do? And how can one benefit from that?
Coaching's not very common in the workplace, but it's very common in other areas like sports, right? If you saw a bunch of kids playing soccer for fun, that's great. But if there's somebody if this group of people want to get better and they didn't have a coach, you'd kind of look at them funny. You'd be like, well, why don't you have someone like guiding you and teaching you these things that will help you grow in this thing that you want to excel at?
Right.
So that's really a career coach is like an athletics coach, but the goal is you. It's even better than having a team coach, because when you have a team coach in athletics, maybe so he doesn't get to play as much as he wants to because he's not the best player. But when you have a career coach, it's all about your goals. Like, I'm not your boss with my own set of career goals to make sure I don't get laid off or I get promoted. I'm here 100% of the time to focus on nurturing and cultivating the success of my clients. So that can be short-term goals like, I need to get more interviews in the next 4 to 6 weeks or land a tech job. Or it can be longer-term goals like, hey, how do I learn to speak with authority and confidence and like get out of my own way? Because I tend to sabotage my own progress at times. So some of those problems take longer to work on than others. But career coaches are also just a sounding board to help you identify how to help yourself solve your own problems. We will step in and help give you tactics in scenarios where the cost of failure is high, like an interview. You don't get a second chance at doing an interview. But a lot of the times coaches are there to think about help you see problems in a different way that make it much easier for you to then know what you need to go do in order to achieve those goals.
Okay. So I picked up a couple of things. So the first thing is, you're right. If you were to go watch a football game or a soccer game and you don't see a coach on the other side, you are going to be terribly confused. Like, how are you guys? What's your strategy?
Why don't you care enough to have someone there to help you succeed? Right?
Yeah. So is it fair to assume that we just think we don't need one because it's not in a field that requires a coach? Like, because the natural thinking would be, why do I need a coach?
So
why should I bother with a coach?
There's a couple of assumptions we're working on. One is my manager will be great at supporting my career development. And after being in tech for 26 years, like, I would say on the whole, I'm largely underwhelmed by the career support that I've received from my managers. And it's not because they're out to get me. It is because a lot of them don't necessarily have a skill set where they're a great people leader. They got into tech because they like the technical part. Some people got into tech because they don't even want to talk to people. They want to write code, right? And then if you try to pick a good leader in tech, it's harder to do because a lot of people get into tech for reasons that they don't want to interact with a ton of people. Not true for everybody, but there are some people who got into tech because they're like, I don't want to have to interact with human beings. I want to write code and look at an IDE, and I want to see my problems, right? So I've also been fortunate enough, though, to have 1 or 2 standout managers that really showed me what was possible, that I excelled underneath when they cared enough to help me grow. And then I realized I want to do that for other people. And so doing that as a coach is beautiful because you don't get to choose your boss, right? And your boss could be good at a great number of things, but one of those things might not be helping you get promoted or ensuring your work gets the visibility it needs to get a good review score. So one of the things that's really really fulfills me is I'm not limited by the people I work with because we don't have to have the same employer. So I think some people early in their career sort of assume their manager is going to be amazing at growing them. And if that's true, that's great, but that's very rare. It just doesn't happen as much as we would hope. So I'm here to help fill a gap compared to what the best managers did for me in my career over a quarter of a century. And then between the gap of them and what the average manager provides for career development. And and you can see it and especially in cases like where you and I work together, where you might not have a manager and you still need help with your career. Like, who do you turn to if you're unemployed or you're laid off or you're on sabbatical and now you want to get a different job? You can't ask your boss about getting a different job. They're unlikely to be very helpful because that's in conflict with their interest, right? So I really enjoy being an advocate, someone that can be in someone's corner, regardless of what company they choose to move on to next.
Okay, so good. On that same question, in terms of what someone can benefit, at what phase of someone's career should one look for a career coach? Because for my own case, it was after I had gone through a performance review and I was off the job. But it somewhat feels a little bit too late at that point because you're under pressure to quickly get something, and you might not fully extract the benefits of a coach. So in hindsight, for me, at what point should a software engineer or a technical manager or someone seek out a career coach? I would assume it shouldn't be at a time when when it's crunch time.
Certainly we can help when you're feeling overwhelmed and you're struggling to get interviews. I'd say of the vast majority of clients I work with now, they come to me when they see a problem. But like you said, that's crunch time. They're getting 1% response rate on their resume. That's a lot of applications to send out. To send out 100 applications to just get one call back. So sometimes they recognize a problem and they say, I need help with this problem. So that can be temporal, but what the real value in coaching is in teaching you these tactics that don't just work to solve the problem right now, but the next time you want to apply for a job, you can reuse a lot of these tactics in order to help you stand out in a meaningful way. So to answer your question directly, when do you find a career coach? Before early career, just getting out of school. I have a couple clients that are college grads or just boot camp grads, and they have less than a year of experience. Those people, it's really hard for them to stand out. So, if you're having a problem standing out and seeking out a job, getting guidance from someone who's worked with a lot of people. I mean, this, but for your audience, I've helped 50 people land tech jobs in the last year and a half. So I have a lot of experience with what the current hiring landscape is looking for, which is different than maybe what we experienced than 3 to 5 years ago. So when there's a problem, then you should ask for a coach if you feel like you can't achieve that goal without assistance from someone else. But that's not just land a job. That could be career clarity. So I have some clients that are software developers and they're like, I don't think I like coding anymore. Like, I don't want to tell my boss that, but I need to talk with someone in confidence and say, what sort of adjacent role might be more fulfilling for me than writing code, because it's not what I thought it was and I don't like it. But what can I do? And so we might come up with a plan for them to pivot to like a TPM role, or to a manager role. And that would require talking with them a lot about what they're good at and what they care about. So that's another example. It's like you feel like you're coming up to a crossroads in your career and you're saying, I feel like I have to choose a path. What better time to have a guide than when you need to choose a path?
And then there's also the last bit when you're going through a layoff. So the first one would be A, I'm just fresh out of
Yep.
school. I don't know what to do. Hone my skills. The second one would be I want to do a transition,
Yep.
or I'm not getting ahead, And then the last category would be people that have been through a layoff. And on the last bit, for people that probably be listening and probably have gone through it, what are those things that you pass them through as you do your service? Just just a summary of what they need to expect.
Yeah, well, first of all, to anyone listening that is experiencing a layoff, especially if it's their first one, like chin up, right? If you haven't been through a layoff before, it's hard to describe to someone else what it's like. It feels like a gut punch, and you're never really prepared for your first layoff. You need to give yourself some grace and take some time to process the layoff. What I've told you, Sahid, and told other people, that a layoff is a career version of being rear-ended in a car, right? 95% of the time it has nothing to do with you, which is at equal parts consoling and infuriating, because you're like, well, wait, why is it happening to me if it doesn't have anything to do with me? And the reality is, I was laid off from my very first job in tech, 22 years ago. And it was traumatic. I thought I was an amazing performer. I'm like, why did this happen to me? But I look back now at it as a gift and say, I believe people in general are worthy of trust, but under no circumstances do I consider a company a person, right? A company needs to do what's in their best interest. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that they're thinking too much about whether to keep you or whether to not keep you. So if you can embrace that, you can take more ownership of your career. So to answer your question, working with me often starts with like with most coaches, we have a discovery call where we sit down and talk about three things, like your goals, so that I understand like what you're trying to do and what's standing in the way of you accomplishing that on your own. And then secondly, based on my experience helping other people with similar goals, what are the tactics you and I might focus on in order to sharpen your axe? So when you go down to chop down trees, you're not it's easy, right? It's easier than you've been making it. So that you don't go down to the tree with a butter knife and say, why can't I chop this tree down, right? It's not because you're not smart, and it's not because you're not strong or that you have a bad work ethic. It's that the tools you're using aren't the right tool for the job. Yeah. And then lastly, we come up with an action plan where we sit down and we say, okay, if these are the goals and these are the tactics I want to teach you to help you achieve these goals, here's what we would do. We would probably talk about your strengths, just like you and I did. What makes you uniquely gifted that we want to double down on in an interview, right? And then how to write a resume or how to network with other people so that way you get more callbacks and you get a bit of an advantage compared to an applicant that just applies on a site and doesn't do anything else. And then work on storytelling. When I've interviewed hundreds of people in tech, and the thing that stands out for me is it is not a test where we take the person who scored the highest on the technical portion of the interview. That's not how these interviews work.
You know what?
Yeah.
Can we talk about that a bit? So that people can get like a behind the scenes, because I know you go through this in your sessions, in your paid session, but just to give a summary of how tech recruiting works, so that people start to understand. So, from when 100 people apply, from when they interview, so that people get to understand that sometimes it's not just you. It's not a you problem. It's not, so just give that assessment.
One thing to note is that most companies, not all, but most companies adopt what's called an open until filled approach, which is to say they evaluate each applicant as they interview them without comparing them to anyone else. This idea of having like a very objective rubric or scale to say, is Sahid good enough to get this job, yes or no? And we can't compare Sahid to Sarah or Shritej or anyone else. That's not how the process usually works. What usually happens is it's like a funnel, right? So if you apply for a job, even though a lot of articles will tell you there's a lot of ATS, algorithms out there filtering a lot of resumes. Most technical recruiters really think you deserve them to be able to at least read every resume they get really quickly. Now, what that means though, is that has implications in how we write our resume, because they're probably going to spend 30 seconds on it because they're looking at a lot of resumes. And so having a resume that stands out visually, like not with colors, but in the way that it's easy to read, like this is something you and I discussed in our sessions as well, but that the goal of this resume is just to really get a recruiter to call you back, because most of the challenge isn't just getting someone to talk to you, right? So that's really the first step. In fact, if you've passed that step, some of the steps in the middle are easier. Like the recruiter screen is usually the next thing, where you talk to someone who's not as qualified as you are, and you have to convince them you're qualified and excited about the job. That's pretty easy to do. There's a strategy we talked about for that. And then once you've gone through the interview, here's the part most people don't know, which I think will be very helpful for your listeners. There's usually like a meeting where we individually to talk about you as an individual. So if you've gone through an interview loop, like a series of interviews, there will be a calendar invite where everyone that interviewed Sahid will be in the same like video call or in the same meeting. And it's called Sahid Adipoju Debrief, right? Or hiring panel for Sahid. Everyone sits down. A very common practice is everybody puts their thumbs out, like Julius Caesar style, sideways, and then they say 1, 2, 3, go, and then everybody either says thumbs up or thumbs down. And then the recruiter who scheduled the meeting documents how many people were thumbs up and how many people were thumbs down. Then they go around the room, 60 seconds for each person, and they summarize their experience meeting with Sahid. What did they like? What did they talk about? Did they have to prompt Sahid with any hints to help him finish the coding questions? What stands out? And, if they're all thumbs down, pretty obvious, like you're not going to extend an offer to Sahid. All thumbs up, pretty obvious, you're going to give the offer to Sahid. Usually it's not all thumbs up or thumbs down, right? Usually it's a combination. And so the hiring manager often is listening to all of the discussions and maybe probing with maybe the 1 or 2 people that said thumbs down. Well, on my team, I don't think that'll be a problem because of XYZ. What do you think? But the decision is usually left up to the hiring manager to make the call. So, it is not like reviewing all offers when you're selling your home and you have 19 offers to look at and you're looking at all of them at the same time to choose the best offer. It's often not the most qualified person that gets the offer. It's usually the first qualified person that gets the offer, because you're evaluated one at a time, right? Now, this is not true for every single tech company. Sometimes, like at a Google, the hiring panel is by design not the people that met with you. Sometimes they're just reading what was written by the interviewers because they want to have another level of avoiding bias, of like personally seeing somebody. None of the people on those hiring panels have ever met with Sahid. All they have is the notes that the interviewers took on Sahid.
The notes.
But when you recognize it comes down often to sort of this very subjective sort of binary thumbs up or thumbs down. It is not that the person who scored the highest is getting the offer. It is the hiring manager's call often on whether we say yes to Sahid or not. And in my experience, having been on hiring panels and being the hiring manager, having hired people, what usually ends up winning is the person that's technical enough to do the job. It's often not the most technical person, someone who a lot of people on the hiring panel want to work with them. Like there's this very fuzzy coworker test. Like, would I enjoy working with Sahid or does it feel like it would be pulling teeth, right? Or does he seem like a robot or a jackass, right? If it's either of those, then no, I don't, like he might not be a good fit for me. But
doesn't matter how well he did
do good enough, right? But in a way, the coding portions are almost like pass fail. You can do like a bad job, a good job, or a really good job, but there's no real way to score over the top amazing in the technical portion because of the way the problems are designed. However, you can absolutely score way over the top and stand out when it comes to the non-technical portions, like the behavioral interview questions, because those are so open-ended
Behavioral question.
that it's really hard for them to contain the story you want to tell. Tell me about a time you had to resolve a conflict with a coworker. If you have a compelling, concise story that doubles down and showcases what Saheed is uniquely good at, like what your superpowers are, the strengths that you and I went through, that is a very compelling answer, and that is more likely to turn someone to a thumbs up than scoring well on the coding. You know, it's not a test that you take and try and be the top scorer, because if I interview on a Monday, Saheed, and you interview on a Wednesday, you could be 5 times better than me, but you may never get the offer because they extended it to me and I accepted, right? If they could offer me the job on Wednesday morning and they're not going to not have the interview with you because they don't know if I'm going to say yes or not, right? So you're in this limbo. There could literally be no job available for you. And it almost doesn't matter how good you did if I say yes, because there's no job.
Right.
Doesn't exist. Like you open the box and there's nothing in there to give Saheed, right? Maybe if the recruiter's kind, they'll be like, wow, Saheed did so well. I wonder if there's other openings. But that opening you applied for, if it's not there, it doesn't matter if you're better. Right?
And that brings me to the other question. Again, you know, you do this, you know, in your sessions, but it's regarding the you applying. If you applied for a job and they asked you to, you know, essentially pick a date for an interview, you are of the opinion, just based on what you just said, is never pick a date too far out.
I'm a big believer in just like an athlete. So imagine you're an athlete and like in American football, there's this thing called the draft, right? And like they, you know, all these people compete for the draft and all of the athletes are in their top shape because they're going to this very famous thing called the combine, which is where they get evaluated to see where they might fit in the draft. Now, some people used to play in the NFL and now they don't have a team, but they always have to stay in top shape in case they get a call. Like the way to think about interviews is to think about them as like, hey, don't engage with recruiters unless you're ready to interview like now, like tomorrow. Like, because if you say wait 3 to 4 weeks, it's like, have you ever been in a deli where they give you the little numbered tickets? Like, you know, you walk into a store and they give you the number and it says now serving 17. If you walk in to talk with a recruiter and say, give me 3 weeks, what you're doing is you're letting 50 people go ahead of you in line. And if any one of them is qualified, not more qualified than you, but just qualified enough to get the offer, why are you holding the door open for 50 other people to go ahead of you? The odds that all 49 of them are not qualified and you are very low. The math isn't there. Like it doesn't support that. So I encourage you to do your leak code studying, practice your stories, get ready. And then when you feel like you're in shape and ready to be evaluated, that's when you engage with recruiters. And that when they say something like, do you have any times next week? That your response is, I have times tomorrow if you want. Like that you try and actually get them to give you a time earlier than they may be even proposing because it's a chance for you to go to the front of the line.
Okay. That's helpful. So from your experience, what unique challenges do international students face? Because I'm one, and international students or professional careers. So there's a lot of international students listen to this. A lot of them are in grad school, about to graduate. A lot of them are in their careers right now, you know, fresh out of school, maybe spent a year. They realized, wait a minute, you know, I'm not being... the promotion was 2%. I did a fantastic job. I got 3%. What will be tied me? What do I do? You know, I can't, you know, my bills are increasing, you know, so what are those challenges?
The cultural differences are very widely across the world, right? You know, like I went to university with someone who traveled a lot when she was in college, and she went to go visit a host family,
Okay.
and they put out a meal in front of her. And culturally, where she was visiting, the custom was that
Yeah.
the guest ate until they were full, and then the family ate afterwards. Okay. And so
Oh wow. That
I can't
what country
remember
is
where
this?
it was. I want to say somewhere in Africa, and I can't remember now. But this was some time ago. This was in the 90s. And so,
Wow.
um, yeah, but
I'll
she
look it
comes
up.
from a culture
Interesting.
where anytime a guest, like a host, gives you food, it is rude to not accept it. So if anybody puts food on your plate, you're basically required to eat it, even if you're like so stuffed you feel like you're gonna barf. So you take those two cultures and you put them
Right.
together, and they gave her like 4 or 5 plates, and she's like, "What do I do?" And the
Oh,
kids are sitting there waiting to eat, and they're like, "Is this girl going to eat all of our food? Are we going to go hungry tonight?" Right? And she felt very awkward about it. And then she finally
right.
had an open discussion with them at the end
I-
and said, "Hey, in my culture, it's rude to say no if someone puts food on their plate." And they had a laugh about it.
So,
But that's a case where what's normal in one area just can be the opposite in another area. So that's not just true
opposite
at dinner,
in another.
right? That's
Yeah.
true in the workplace. Cultural differences can have these ripple effects in the interview process, right? I have a resume example.
Right.
I've seen a resume from Germany that had the following.
Yeah.
You're going to freak out when you hear this. It had the person's name, it had their address, it had their date of
Right.
birth, it had their
Yes.
profile picture, and it had their
Uh-huh.
signature. Like, and you look at that from the United States and you say, if I lost that document, I feel like I might be a victim of identity theft because it has so much information.
Let me what you just mentioned is
Yeah.
not weird to
Yeah.
me. In Nigerian resumes, when I got here, the first thing I had to do was to do a redo of my resume. It had my name, had my address, had the local government area I was from in Nigeria, had my state of origin, had
Yeah.
my date of birth.
And everybody
picture.
says, "Why are you putting this
So-
on?" Like, they look
so-
at you weird, right? They say, like, "Why are you doing this?" Because, like, to a US recruiter, they're like,
Yes.
if you don't understand that stuff shouldn't be on there, do I have bigger questions about your ability to understand if you can perform the role we're asking you to? Now, that's not a fair assumption, but that is
Right.
absolutely a thought that goes through their head.
Yeah.
So, it can show up in how you tell
Okay.
stories. A lot of people I work with are afraid to be too boastful on their resume, right? Where they claim this business impact. But if you don't
Yes.
list that stuff in the United States in tech, it's very hard to get attention of a recruiter. They're looking at 200 resumes a day, and if they all say, "I wrote
Right.
code, I wrote code, I wrote code," like, how are you going to stand out? So
Right.
what might be boastful or inappropriate in some
Right.
cultures, maybe at best practice in other geographies. And so it becomes very important
Right.
that you get help. It doesn't have to be from a coach like me necessarily. It can be from a friend that
Right.
who grew up in that culture or in that professional environment, and have them look at what you're writing. This falls into a
Right.
blind spot, right? It's like, and the
Okay.
problem with the blind spot is you don't know that you have a blind spot. That's what makes it blind. So you won't be able to know
Yeah.
what to ask.
That's
You
true.
have to show. So like you will just document your resume and you will
Yeah.
show it to somebody. And I look at it and I go, "What are you doing?" And then we strip out the things that make it look like it stands out for the wrong reasons, right? Which are honest mistakes. But
Right.
when a recruiter can look at 200 resumes, they're not probably going to reach out to you and say, "Hey, by
Right.
the way, you don't need to do this." If they do, you probably owe them a coffee, because like they're very much like overworked and underpaid people in all industries. So yeah.
It's true. So how can they being the international students navigate these challenges, especially in the new cultural and professional environment? You did allude to some of them, but what are the other ones? So things like if a recruiter that is nice enough can help out.
Yeah, so like
What are the other
even in the
ways?
United States, a lot of people will have different experiences with different kinds of recruiters. Like a recruiter for Meta, for example, is pretty helpful in terms of
Yeah.
telling you exactly the types of things that you'll be asked and the order of the interviews. and they'll actually give you tips on how to
Okay.
prepare for the interview. Now, if you're not used to that, you could get caught off guard. You might even be a little suspicious. Wait, are they trying to
Right.
get me to prepare for one thing and then trick me by asking me these other questions? No, the recruiters at Meta are sincerely trying to fill these roles with top talent, and they don't want some minor easy thing that you and he or she could go over before the meeting to stand in that way. So when you're meeting with a recruiter, you should ask them openly, like, what type of relationship, what type of engagement am I going to have with you? Are you evaluating me, or are you supporting me and trying to maximize my chances of getting this role? Because some of them are the latter, but if you don't ask that, then you will treat it like the former. You lose an option to get a very experienced person to help you maximize the chances that you make it farther through the hiring process, right? So ask, there's a lot of, don't be afraid of asking. Like, the worst they can say is, no, I can't offer that service. That's fine. But there's so many people that don't ask and don't take advantage of the resources they didn't know were available. So always ask. Yeah.
Okay. So what are the key strategies that international job seekers should keep in mind? International students, in the vast mist of 1 million applications, there's usually this notion of, I'm not getting feedback. No one's replying to me. No one is. I'm getting rejections. Some of the things I tell them is probably target companies that already hire international students, as opposed to just firing resumes all around the place. What are the strategies?
So one thing you can do is you can do a couple things. So one is recognize you have blind spots, because if the culture that you're applying into is not one you're familiar with, and so I know we talked about this in our sessions, but don't ever underestimate the value of networking, right? And that there is a way to meet people that work at the companies that you want to work for. And there's a large number of people, especially in tech, that want to help you, as long as when you meet with them, you give them an opportunity to talk about their favorite topic, which of course is themselves. So if you give them an opportunity to tell their story about what it's like to work there, and what they wish they knew when they started, or what pattern of behaviors do you see high performers exhibiting in your organization, and how does that differ maybe than other companies you've worked for? Like, if you get them a chance to tell their story, if you give them this miniature TEDx podium for just like 5 minutes and ask about them, not about you, right? But ask them to tell their story. You put them in a position where they feel like they feel comfortable with you, and they're more likely to help you. And then if you just ask for some advice at the end, and you say, hey, I'm applying for a job at Meta. Thank you so much for sharing this. Do you have any advice on how to put my best foot forward when I'm applying for this role? I mean, there are people who won't help you, which is a true statement, but I've had clients do that. And when they finish the networking chat, they realize they were talking to the hiring manager for the job they just applied for. Like, they accidentally stumbled on to the person who was going to interview them in a week. And when my client, who will remain nameless, when he did that networking tactic, he put himself at the top of a list compared to everyone else, because nobody else stumbled across him, and it was a small company, so his odds were pretty high. So, like, he was already at the top of the list, and it was his job to lose, basically. And so he went into the interview, and he got the offer, and he accepted the offer, and he loves working there. But that creating opportunities for you to get an advantage, that happens when you network with people. And networking should really be seen as this, it's like planting seeds, right? It is like, you don't expect to get results when you plant seeds tomorrow. Like, you don't expect to be able to like walk in and grab something out of the ground. But if you play the long game, like if you do networking to help other people succeed, in a way that they want to help you succeed, but you don't keep score. You're not like, I helped you, now you have to help me. It's really about creating a community where people want to help each other. And if you lead from a place of generosity, you'd be surprised what people are willing to do for you, and they'll remember you, right? Like, I have a quick story I can tell you about. Like, I worked as a contractor before I worked for Microsoft, before I worked for Zillow, before Coinbase. I worked as a contractor, as a vendor for Microsoft, and my contract was coming due. And they were like, we don't have any more work. And I was like, huh? Well, I really liked the machine, like the PC I was using, because back in the day, we didn't use laptops. We used like desktops. And I asked the director of IT, hey, I really like this machine, and I have an old one at home. Would you be willing to barter like 30 hours of my time, or the value of this PC divided by my hourly rate, so that I can give you free work, and then I can just take the machine home when I'm done? And the director said, oh, wow, I don't know. I've never been asked that, but let me go find out. And he said, yeah, we're just going to put this PC in a storage bin, and it's not gonna, and then we're going to write it down on taxes. But I can modify it to make sure we don't write it down on taxes. And in exchange, I would love to get 30 more hours of work for you for free. We just don't have the budget. So I made this deal. And then because I was there for another week or so, I was around for the holiday party, because like my contract ended in like early December. And so I got invited to the party because I was now employed. I'm still in the office. So I get invited, and then I talked to someone I had been networking with at the holiday party. Her name was Janice. And I told her my contract was ending, and she's like, oh, well, what skills do you have? I have like 5 openings. And I said, well, what do you have openings in? And she's like, oh, analyst work. And I was like, oh, I am an analyst. She grabbed a bottle of beer. I grabbed a bottle of beer. We went back to her office and we did an interview, like dressed up in our holiday attire, drinking beer, right? And I got the job, and I started the following Monday. And had I not done that, I probably wouldn't have gotten the job at Microsoft, and that probably wouldn't have led to where I am today. So, be open to these alternative ideas, because if you can create an opportunity for you to get something that's an advantage for you, like, why would you not do that, right? I didn't go in to the barter thinking I'm going to get a job. I just did it because I wanted the machine, but it had a really, really helpful side effect, right? I was probably making $38 an hour there. I've made high 6 figures, mid to high 6 figures in my career. I can kind of trace it back to some of these events where I networked and I leveraged it successfully because I got lucky, right?
Right. So it's very effective. How does one do that, especially if you're new? You're new in the country. Right? How do you go? One way I did it was to go to conferences.
The other thing is, like, if you know that you have a skill set that's rare, can you offer it to other people in exchange for just some of their time, right?
Oh, okay. Just like you exchanged your time for the PC.
They have a resource that's not of high value to them. My resource of time was much more valuable to them than the PC was. But in my case, the PC was much more valuable to me than my time, because I didn't have another job lined up. So what happens really successfully in this barter or this exchange situation is both parties feel like they're getting a deal, because they value what you're giving them more than what they're giving you.
And it's so like for you as well.
For example, imagine I do like I have a personal trainer, and he charges me a certain amount of money per session. Okay. Now he probably has he needs to make a profit on that session, right? Because he pays a gym, because he's a part of the gym for that time in the gym. So he has a cost, and then he has a profit. But I had extra kettlebells like in my house that I had been using for a long time, and I had no longer have use for them. I went to the gym owner and I said, hey, I noticed you don't have these heavier kettlebells in your gym. Are you interested in these? Now, buying kettlebells and getting them shipped is
Okay.
prohibitively expensive because they weigh so much. So you can pay more in shipping than you do for the actual bell itself, because
For the
they have
actual
to show up on
device.
pallets often. So I said, hey, I will deliver these to your gym because I live 5 minutes away. Would you be interested in trading these for like personal training sessions? And he said, well, how much are you thinking? And so I ended up getting 10 group workout sessions for kettlebells that have just been sitting in my living room for 2 years, and I haven't used them. So to me, they're almost worth zero. I mean, I don't want to sell them for zero, but to me, they have very little value. But because I want to do these group training sessions, these group training sessions are like $30 a piece. And so I'm getting $300 of value for basically like not having to listen to my wife yell about me getting rid of the kettlebells in the living room because they've been there forever behind the couch, right? So, but to them, they're getting equipment that would cost them more money to get shipped, and I'm shipping it for free, right? I'm bringing it to their gym, and now they can use those weights with their clients, including me, if they want to. So that benefit to them is worth more than just giving me a small handful of sessions, because they get to keep those kettlebells forever, right?
Forever. Yeah. On the questions of resume and interview preparation, can you share some essential tips for crafting a resume that stands out?
This is something I've done a lot of work with, and I know we've talked about this before, Sahid. But for your audience, I've done a lot of resume experiments over the last 18 months or so. So I've talked with about a dozen technical recruiters. I've A/B tested resume formats and said, which one of these would you choose, A or B, and why? And I've done that a lot. Like, what about this? What about this? What about this? And then I started applying those tactics I learned, and that's what's been helping these 50 people land jobs, or at least get callbacks. So like most experiments, they are not always intuitive in terms of what we find out that works. And that's why experiments are so valuable. I don't believe anyone should trust me because I've worked at company X or Y. You should follow this advice because I've used it, I've documented the results, and I can speak to the impact that it's had. So the number one thing I've learned, the goal of a resume is to get a recruiter to call you back. That is pretty much its only job. You can talk about anything in the interview you want. Doesn't even have to be on the resume. But the biggest problem right now is getting the interview. That's the bigger challenge. So there needs to be enough there for the hiring manager to know that you're qualified. So it can't be 100% for the recruiter, but like 70% recruiter and maybe 30% targeting the hiring manager. That's the right benefit. Now, when you and I write a resume, our default approach is to make it 100% for the hiring manager. We want to be impressive to the boss. And it turns out that's like almost 100% wrong. That's about 70% wrong. And the reason is the recruiter can't read what you write when you write it for your hiring manager, because you're using terms and phrases that a recruiter has no idea what any of them mean. Like none of them. Like, in fact, let me read to you. I have an example. So let me read to you. So I'm going to read one line from an actual resume that I helped with. I have approval from this client to do this. I just can't name who they are. Tell me what part of the following bullet point, it's on this resume, do you think a recruiter understands? Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Orchestrated the seamless integration of real-time data feeds into multiple microservices using Kafka, enabling up-to-the-minute insights and enhancing operational efficiency through Python, WSGI, and ASGI web frameworks, including Django and Flask, reducing request latency by over 95%. So, that's a mouthful.
That's a mouthful.
What part do you think a recruiter understands of what I just read?
Just operational efficiency by
like
95%.
The last 4 words.
Is the only thing that
exactly full marks. They basically understand reduced latency by 95%. They probably don't even know what request latency is, and that's okay. But if this document is designed for a recruiter to get them to call you back, and you write a bullet point like that, you're not
Yeah.
helping your cause. You're
Yeah.
making it impossibly difficult. The recruiter has to scan all this foreign language stuff, this gibberish, just to get 4 words that they understand, and that drains their energy. It's dizzying to read a highly technical resume as a recruiter. So don't give them a highly technical resume. I think that was one of the biggest learnings I've had.
Okay.
So the other thing is, recruiters see resumes that are really dense. You need to spend most of your time making your resume like as concise as humanly possible. Like my average word count for the resumes I help people with is around 400 words, 450 words. That is not a lot of words. It is really short.
450 words. So if someone has a decade of experience, still 450 words?
Maybe 500. Yep. So what we do with people who have over 10 years of experience is there's usually an inflection point. So the real goal here is you're trying to maximize what I call business impact density. Okay. So business impact density means you need to, in as few words as possible, demonstrate as much business impact as humanly possible, which means at some point adding the 9th or the 10th job, yes, it adds business impact, but not enough to justify it making the resume longer. So what happens is you kind of need to score each of these jobs like on a scale of 1 to 10, and the average needs to be like a 9 or 9.5. If you add an entry for a job from like 12 years ago and it reduces the average impact because it's so lengthy, it shouldn't be there, right? You need to demonstrate like
it shouldn't be there.
Discipline in terms of like how tight can you make this document? Like it is maximize the business impact in as few words as humanly possible. So if you can do that, you will show a recruiter that you care about their sanity because you can make the font size 11 point. Like I don't even believe in 10-point resume fonts, 11-point resume, like with Arial. And bullet points, so I don't, this is really hard to do, which is why I help people with it. But when you can show business results, a little taste of what you did to get those business results, and it's really, really tight, it stands out. It stands out in a way that makes it really easy for a recruiter to scan very quickly. Yeah. So there's actually I have a super helpful LinkedIn post about this very topic. It has a picture of food on it. So maybe we can link to it like in the comments when this goes live. And then it doesn't have all of my tips. It has maybe half of them, but it's got 9 important tips that that will help a lot of people get a little bit more response rate. Like a good example of when you need to be working on your resume is if you're getting a 1% response rate, and you have 3 to 5 years of experience, that means your resumes probably need some work or you're targeting the wrong jobs. But, I had a client go from, 1.5% response rate to 30% response rate, like after we fixed his resume. Now, he had 7 years of experience. He was a data engineer. He's not a college hire, right? But this document can make a big difference, right? For him, it's apply to 10, 15x less roles and still get the same number of callbacks. Like that will save your sanity. So,
yes, it would. I want to leave the last question for you to talk about your services, the cost. What does it involve? I've been through it, so I know it. But I want you to talk about it. I want it to be, because I enjoyed our session so much, and I felt this would help other people. So feel free to kind of advertise your consultant service in terms of what you bring to the table, the value, because what people would pay and what they get out of this is immensely much more. So a lot of people always think, I have to pay. So what do you do? How much is it? What are the steps? And so what did they get out of it?
There's a couple different things I'll offer, but what I'll start off by saying is I know that people are frustrated when they hear this answer from a coach like it depends. But it really does. So let me explain why. Like,
Fair enough. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
So
you're
most
being honest.
coaches
So yes.
don't have a default solution that they like say, this is going to solve your problems, because we want to hear what it is you're
Okay.
struggling with, so that we can talk about what is the problem
Okay.
that Sahid, or the goals that Sahid has in order to achieve these goals. And so,
Right.
you know, to give someone like
Okay.
a price or say, this is what we do, it's kind
Yes.
of like going to the doctor and them giving you a prescription before you've even talked about what your problems are. Like, you shouldn't probably take that medicine because that you could be allergic
That's
to it. It
true.
may be the exact wrong thing you need. It could be really expensive and you don't need
Okay.
that. Don't go in for surgery when Advil is enough to
Right.
solve your sore muscles, right? So, you know, a
the
good
problem.
coach is going
Yes.
to say, hey, let's have a discovery call. And you and I did this, right? Like 45 minutes, an hour, and we go deep on your
Okay.
goals. And then we come up with, if
Right.
those are your symptoms, what is the prescription, the solution that will meet those needs? Yes, it usually includes a series of coaching sessions. You know, usually
Okay.
it's 3 to 6 coaching sessions with me. Some coaches like to advertise
Okay.
like 6 or 12
Okay.
month coaching programs. I'm a little different. Like, you know, I don't know if you ever interviewed anybody else before
Right.
you worked with me, Saeed, but, you know, I'm a more surgical sort of, let's look at the problem. Let's look at the tactics you
Yes.
need to learn so you can sharpen this axe and then go chop these
Yes.
trees down. And then
Yes.
once those goals are met,
Yes.
if we want to keep working together on a new set of goals, so be it. And so, you know, it
Right.
is hard to say it depends, but honestly, it does depend.
Okay.
I've helped a client with one
Okay.
call. In fact, I offer a resume workshop that people can set up time with me. Like, it's on my website,
Right.
refactorcoaching.com. When you book time
Right.
with me and we walk through this, it could be like, hey, I feel like I have a good handle on interviews. I usually get an offer a third of the time when I do an interview. I just can't get a recruiter to
Right.
call me back. Well, that person, maybe all we need to work on
Okay.
is a resume review. I can just redo the resume. You know, that's pretty
Right.
affordable. That's like $250, like, for us to sit down. You send me the resume, we
Right.
redo it in the call, and you walk away with a new resume.
Right.
So that's on the small end. On the higher end,
Right.
I've helped clients for 2 years on and off because they came to me for career clarity. Then we found a job to help them with interviewing.
Right.
And then a year or two later, they wanted to get a promotion. And so
Right.
we're like, how do you set yourself up for a promo? So
Yeah. Okay.
the goals may change, but generally speaking, most engagements
Right.
I do are somewhere between 3 and 6 hours of like one-on-one video calls like you and I did, and teach you some tactics that are
Right.
relevant to the goals that you're trying to achieve. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the price does vary a little bit. You know, I'm open about the fact that I actually charge entry-level people, like early talent, I charge them less than I charge more senior people, because it's, for one, it's fairer. Like, I have clients that make $700,000 a
Yes.
year. I also have clients that are making $0. Like,
Yeah.
it's not, I don't think it's fair to charge
Yeah.
those people the same amount of money, if I'm being
Right.
honest. Value of getting promoted
Right.
when you're making $600,000 a year is by definition like 10x more than someone trying to land their second job
Yeah.
in tech. And I think the investment amount should kind of like be adjusted accordingly. So a fair number of people I have that are early career that pay a lot less than the people that I help that are directors or VPs, because I believe in the investment should really match the value of the outcome. You're not really some hourly rate, which I think is a big misconception. It's like, it's very easy to say it's this much and we're only meeting 5 times. It's like, no, the value of your goal is this, you know. And I think you're in a unique scenario. I've never been on a podcast with a client before, but like these things that we worked on, right? Like, none of those were specific to the job that you ended up really applying for. Like, that's 100% reusable for the rest of your career. So it's not giving you a fish,
That's
right?
true.
It's kind of teaching you to fish, and you can reuse this for the rest of the time you want to be employed by someone else instead of starting your own thing. Right. So,
True. So you still offer
Yes.
you still have the free
anyone
sessions?
who's interested in talking further about the 3 use cases I help. So one is career clarity. The other one is I need to land a
Right.
job, right? I want a job or I don't have one, or
Right.
I want to get promoted, right? And this applies primarily for engineers, PMs, and then people in leadership positions. So that's really like my focus. I
Awesome.
help people outside of that focus, but that's my primary focus area. They can book a free discovery call if they just go to refactorcoaching.com.
Yeah, I'll put it in the description so that as long as anyone listens to this episode, they will be able to jump on the calendar and book something, and I can guarantee that they will get the help they're looking for, because I did get the help that I was seeking, and even much more.
I love
So,
you know this, Saeed, but I love helping people. I make 84% less than I did before, like when I was in tech. So this is not something I'm doing to buy a yacht or a mansion. This is something I do to pay my bills and get to do what I love. And I try to make it as accessible as possible for everybody, depending on their specific situation. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Brian, and thank you, Mrs. Pullum, for helping out Brian here and to push him towards his goal. Thank you very much again, Brian, for coming on the show. I hope you had fun as much as I did, and I hope this goes a long way in building your business and helping more
Thanks
people.
for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Leap with Jack Ma. I hope it brought you valuable insights and stories that resonate with your journey. If you have any thoughts to share, questions, or want to send a voice note with your feedback, please visit our website at leapwithjackpot.io. You will find a contact from there. I would love to hear from you and feature your voice in a future episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform, some of which are Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or Player FM. Your subscriptions and reviews help us grow and reach more listeners, and I truly appreciate each one of them. Also, check out our merch store on leapwithjackpot.io website for some cool t-shirts and hoodies, perfect for showing your support for the show. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll dive even deeper into the experiences and challenges of international education and careers. Until then, keep leaping forward, and thanks again for being part of the Leap with Jackpot community.